My sister banned my autistic son from her wedding, claiming he would ruin her perfect aesthetic. I didn't argue. I just logged into my bank. When the venue ran the card 3 days later, the decline notification was the only wedding gift I sent. Before we continue today's story, we have an urgent announcement to make. Due to technical issues, we are pivoting towards another channel. Please subscribe to our new channel, Inherited Revenge. You can find the link in the video description, the pinned comment, and the collaboration tag on this video. Make sure to switch over now so you don't miss out. Thank you for your support. Now back to the story. The living room was finally quiet, save for the rhythmic, comforting clack-clack-clack of Leo sorting his agate collection on the coffee table. He was in his own world, humming a low, vibrating note that I knew meant he was regulating, winding down from a day that had been overstimulating at school. I watched him from the kitchen island, a mug of tea warming my hands, feeling that familiar, heavy exhaustion that settles into your bones when you're a single parent working a high-pressure tech job. I was just about to tell him it was time to start the bedtime routine. Teeth brushing, pajamas, and 10 minutes of reading about tectonic plates, when my phone buzzed against the granite countertop. The screen lit up with a photo of my sister, Vanessa. I smiled, though it was a tired smile. The wedding was only 5 days away. I assumed she was calling to panic about the seating chart or to ask if I had picked up the custom silk runners she had demanded at the last minute. I slid the green icon over and put the phone to my ear, keeping my voice low so I wouldn't disturb Leo's focus. "Hey, Van," I said, leaning against the counter. "Deep breaths. Whatever it is, we can fix it. Did the florist cancel the peonies?" There was a silence on the other end that felt too heavy, too thick. It wasn't the silence of a bad connection. It was the silence of someone gathering the courage to say something they knew they shouldn't. "Sophia," she said. Her voice was tight, clipped. It didn't sound like the sister I had practically raised after Mom died. It sounded like a stranger rehearsing a line. "We need to talk about Saturday." "Okay," I said, frowning. "I have the suits picked up. Leo is excited about his bow tie. He's been practicing walking down the aisle without skipping." "Yeah, about that," she cut in, her voice pitching higher. "I've been talking to Julian and his mother, and we've been looking at the final aesthetic for the ceremony. It's going to be extremely high-end, Sophia, very quiet, very structured. We're going for a silent luxury vibe." My stomach tightened. I knew that tone. It was the tone she used when she wanted to ask for money, but this felt different. "Okay, Leo can be quiet, we've practiced." "It's not just the noise," she said, and I could hear the impatience leaking through. "It's him. Look, Julian's family is inviting investors. There are going to be photographers everywhere. I can't have Leo doing that thing he does." "That thing?" I asked, my voice dropping to a whisper, though my heart began to hammer against my ribs. "The hand flapping, Sophia, the rocking, the way he stares at the floor," she snapped. "It's weird. It makes people uncomfortable. And frankly, it's going to ruin the video. I want a perfect day. I deserve a perfect day." I gripped the phone so hard my knuckles turned white. I looked over at Leo. He was holding a piece of blue lace agate up to the lamp, his eyes wide with wonder, completely innocent of the poison spilling out of my speaker. "Vanessa," I said, my voice shaking, "he is your nephew. He loves you." "He doesn't even understand what a wedding is," she scoffed. "Look, you can come, obviously. You're the maid of honor. But Leo needs to stay home. Hire a sitter. Actually, better yet, keep him away from the venue entirely. I don't want him lurking around the reception either. You want me to leave my 8-year-old son at home because he doesn't fit your aesthetic. I want you to prioritize me for once," she yelled, losing the composure. "Just this once, Sophia. Don't bring your weird kid to my wedding. If you show up with him, security will turn you away. I'm serious. Just stay away if you can't follow one simple rule." She didn't wait for a response. She didn't ask how I felt. She just hung up. The disconnect tone buzzed in my ear, loud and harsh in the quiet kitchen. I stood there, frozen, staring at the black screen of my phone. The betrayal wasn't a sharp knife. It was a dull, heavy bludgeon that knocked the wind out of me. It was worse than the diagnosis itself, worse than the day his father left. This was my blood, my sister. I looked at Leo again. He turned to me beaming, holding up the rock. "Mom, look," banded Chalcedony. I forced a smile, though I felt like I was going to vomit. "It's Bo." "Typhal buddy," I whispered. I set the phone down on the counter. I didn't cry. I didn't call her back. I didn't scream. A cold, absolute clarity washed over me, displacing the hurt. She wanted me to prioritize her. She wanted the perfect day provided by the perfect family. She had forgotten who was paying for that perfection. The night was a blur of mechanical motions. I went through the bedtime routine with Leo on autopilot. I fluffed his weighted blanket, I read the pages about the lithosphere and the asthenosphere, and I kissed his forehead, smelling the faint scent of his strawberry shampoo. He fell asleep within minutes, safe and oblivious, dreaming of geodes and canyons. I, however, did not sleep. I sat in the dark of my living room, the silence of the house pressing in on me. My phone sat on the coffee table, face up. It lit up twice. One text from Vanessa: "I know you're mad, but you'll get over it. It's for the best. Just make sure the check for the caterer clears by Friday morning." One text from my father, Frank: "Van called me. She's stressed, honey. Don't make this about you. Just do what she asks. It's her day." I stared at the messages, feeling a physical ache in my chest. It was a tightness, a constriction that made it hard to draw a full breath. For years, I had told myself that this was just how our family worked. I was the strong one, the capable one, the one who didn't need help, so I was the one who gave it. I walked to the window and looked out at the suburban street, the streetlights casting long, lonely shadows. I remembered when Vanessa was born. I was 8 years old, the same age Leo was now. I remembered holding her, promising to protect her. I remembered buying her prom dress when Dad was out of work. I remembered paying off her student loans when she forgot to file the paperwork for deferment. And now, she was ashamed of the only thing in my life that mattered more than her. She thought she had all the power because she was the bride. She thought that because I had always been the pushover, the good big sister, I would fold. She assumed I would hire a nanny, swallow my pride, and stand beside her in that silk chiffon dress, smiling for the cameras while my heart broke for my son. But grief is a funny thing. Sometimes it burns hot and fast. Other times it freezes you solid. I went to my home office and booted up my laptop. The blue light of the screen illuminated the room, casting stark shadows across my desk. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. I logged into my primary banking portal. It wasn't just a checking account. It was the command center of my financial life. A life I had built from scratch, coding until my eyes burned, climbing the corporate ladder in a male-dominated field so that Leo would never, ever want for anything. I clicked on the tab labeled Credit Cards. There it was, the Platinum Rewards card. The card I had added Vanessa to as an authorized user 6 months ago when the wedding planning started. The card I had handed to her with a smile, saying, "Use this for the deposits. I want you to have the wedding Mom never got to see." I clicked on transaction history. The numbers scrolled by, a dizzying list of excess. La Mason Floral Design, $8,500. Deposit, the Gilded Cage venue, $12,000. First installment, Couture Bridal, $6,200. Luxury Limousine Services, $1,500. She had been swiping it like it was a magic wand, and I had let her. I had paid the monthly balances without a word, absorbing the cost because I wanted her to be happy, because I thought we were a team. My eyes drifted to the pending section. There were hold charges for the remaining balances. The venue, the caterer, the florist, they were all scheduled to run the final, massive charges in exactly 48 hours. The wedding industry runs on a strict pay in full before the day policy. If those cards didn't clear by Wednesday at 5:00 p.m., contracts would be voided. Vanessa thought she was uninviting a guest. She thought she was cutting out a weird inconvenience. But they had forgotten one crucial thing. You don't bite the hand that feeds you, especially when that hand is holding the kill switch. I moved my cursor to the Manage Authorized Users button. I didn't hesitate, I didn't tremble. I clicked Remove User Vanessa. Then I went a step further. I clicked Report Lost Stolen on the primary card, effectively freezing the entire account number immediately. No new charges could be processed. No pending charges would clear. The plastic card in Vanessa's purse was now just a worthless piece of scrap aimed at a dead account. I closed the laptop, the soft click echoing in the room like a gavel coming down. The next morning, the sun rose, but the coldness inside me hadn't thawed. I went through the motions of getting Leo ready for school, packing his bento box with the crustless sandwiches he liked, checking his backpack for his noise-canceling headphones. "Mom, we still going to the party with the cake?" Leo asked as he tied his shoes. He struggled with the bunny ears, his tongue poking out in concentration. I knelt down, taking his hands gently. "No, sweetie, the plans changed. We're going to do something even better on Saturday. Maybe the Science Museum." His face lit up, the one with the dinosaur bones. "The very same," I said, smoothing his hair. He didn't ask why. He didn't care about the wedding. He just wanted to be where he was safe and interested. Why couldn't Vanessa see that? Why couldn't she see that his weirdness was just a different kind of brilliance? After I dropped him off, the reality of my history with Vanessa began to replay in my mind. A montage of uneven sacrifices. It hadn't started with the wedding. It started years ago. When Mom died, Dad fell apart. He retreated into a bottle and a haze of grief, leaving me, at 22, to steer the ship. I worked 2 jobs while finishing my master's degree. I cooked dinner. I made sure Vanessa, who was just a teenager then, had the trendy clothes, the yearbook fees, the prom tickets. "You have to take care of her, Sophia," Dad would say, slurring slightly from the recliner. "She's fragile, she needs us." I had internalized that. I had made myself armor so she could remain soft. And then she met Julian. Julian wasn't just a boyfriend, he was a lifestyle upgrade. He came from old money, or at least, the kind of money that looked old but was mostly tied up in leveraged assets and trust funds with strict allowances. He was handsome in a generic catalog way, with a smile that never quite reached his eyes. I remembered the dinner where they introduced us to his parents. It was 3 months ago. We were at a steakhouse where the menu didn't list prices. "So, Sophia," Julian had said, swirling his wine, "Vanessa tells me you're in computers." "Software architecture," I corrected politely. "I specialize in back-end security for fintech." "Fascinating," he said, clearly bored. He turned his gaze to Leo, who was quietly stacking sugar packets into a pyramid. Julian reached out and flicked the pyramid, knocking it over. Leo flinched, letting out a small, startled yelp. "Julian," I snapped. "What?" Julian laughed, looking around the table for validation. "He needs to toughen up. Can't have him jumping at shadows if he's going to be around my family. We're a loud bunch." Vanessa didn't defend Leo. She didn't scold Julian. She just reached out and touched Julian's arm, laughing nervously. "Oh, you know, Leo, he's just particular. Sorry, babe." She apologized to him. That was the moment I should have seen it coming. Julian was the architect of this new Vanessa. He was the one who made comments about presentation and brand. He was the one who whispered in her ear that her family, specifically the autistic nephew and the overworked sister, were dragging down her stock value. I drove to work, the memory making my blood boil. My phone rang again. It was Dad. "Sophia," he said, his voice heavy with that familiar mix of guilt and manipulation. "Vanessa says you haven't texted her back." "I'm busy, Dad. I'm working." "She's worried about the payments, honey. She says the catering manager called and said they need the final $15,000 by tomorrow or they can't order the Wagyu beef." $15,000, I repeated, my voice flat. "Yeah, look, I know it's a lot, but you promised. And you know how the Mortys are," he said, referring to Julian's family. If things aren't perfect, they'll judge her. We can't have that. Just pay it, Sophia. Be the bigger person. For me. Be the bigger person, I echoed. It was the mantra of my life. Be the bigger person while we slice pieces off you to keep ourselves warm. I handled it, Dad, I lied. The lie tasted like ash, but also like victory. Tell her not to worry about a thing. Good girl, he said, relieved. I knew you wouldn't let us down. You're a good sister, Sophia, even if you are, a bit stubborn. He hung up, satisfied that the order of the world was maintained. Sophia pays, Vanessa shines. Frank takes credit for raising such a close family. I stared at the phone in the passenger seat. They had no idea that the good sister had left the building. Wednesday morning arrived with a deceptive calm. The sky was a bruised purple, threatening rain, mirroring the storm brewing inside my chest. I dropped Leo off at school, watching him skip toward the entrance with his heavy backpack, his headphones already on. He didn't look back. He trusted me to be there when he came out. That trust was the only fuel I had left. I drove to my office in the financial district, the city skyline looming like a fortress of glass and steel. My workspace was a corner office on the 35th floor, a testament to 15 years of missed holidays, late nights, and solving problems that made other engineers quit. I sat down, booted up my 3-monitor setup, and took a sip of black coffee. It was bitter, grounding me. I had frozen the cards. The kill switch was flipped, but my mind wouldn't rest. Something about Vanessa's desperation the night before and Julian's behavior at that dinner didn't sit right. It was the way Julian had looked at the menu, not with the ease of someone who grew up with money, but with the calculation of someone checking the math. And then there was his family business, Morty Holdings. He had been vague about what they actually did, tossing around buzzwords like equity and diversified assets. I opened a terminal window. Let's see who you really are, Julian, I whispered. I started with a basic background check, the kind anyone with a credit card could run. It came back clean but thin, too thin, no property records in his name, no vehicle registrations. For a man who claimed to split his time between the city and a vineyard in Napa, he had a remarkably small digital footprint. I dug deeper. I accessed the public court records database, searching for civil judgments in the tri-state area. Nothing under Julian Morty. I frowned. Maybe he was squeaky clean, but my gut, honed by years of spotting anomalies in code, screamed otherwise. I went back to the Morty Holdings LLC. I pulled the incorporation documents. The registered agent was a P.O. box in Delaware, standard for privacy. But the manager listed wasn't Julian Morty, it was a Julian Miller. My fingers flew across the keyboard. Julian Miller. The screen populated with hits. State of New York versus Julian Miller, breach of contract. Citibank versus Julian Miller, default judgment, $45,000. Eviction notice, 4500 Park Avenue, Apt 4B, plaintiff, Greystone Properties. The blood drained from my face. I opened the eviction file. It was dated 6 months ago. The address matched the luxury apartment Vanessa claimed they were moving into after the wedding. I kept digging, my heart rate climbing with every click. I found a lien on a Mercedes-Benz, repossessed last year. I found a small claims case from a woman named Isabella R. for unpaid loans. Julian wasn't old money. He wasn't even new money. He was a grifter. He was drowning in debt, living on credit, and likely hunting for a lifeline. And that lifeline was my sister. Or more accurately, me. I sat back, the leather chair creaking. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. Julian didn't love Vanessa. He didn't care about her aesthetic. He was marrying her because he thought we were rich. He saw the way I paid for everything. He saw Frank's house, which I paid the mortgage on. He assumed the family money was a bottomless well he could tap into once the ring was on her finger. Vanessa wasn't just being cruel, she was being conned. I looked at the clock. It was 11:00 a.m. The first big vendor payment, the The $15,000 for the catering was scheduled to hit my card at noon. I could unfreeze it. I could save her from the humiliation. I could pay the scammer to keep my sister happy for a few more months until the inevitable crash. I looked at the photo of Leo on my desk. He was smiling, holding a geode, safe and loved. "No," I said aloud. I picked up my phone and dialed a number I hadn't used in years. It was a private investigator I had used for a corporate espionage case back in 2018. "Marcus," I said when he answered. "It's Sophia. I need a rush job. Full financial forensic on a Julian Miller, alias Julian Morty. And I need to know if he's currently married or has other entanglements. I need it by Friday." "Sophia," Marcus's gravelly voice replied, "you sound like you're going to war." "I am," I said, staring at the eviction notice on my screen. "I just found out the enemy is inside the gates." The explosion happened at 12:15 p.m. I was in a code review meeting when my phone began to vibrate violently against the table. "Vanessa calling." I ignored it. It buzzed again immediately. "Vanessa calling." Then a text, "Pick up right now. There is an emergency." Then another, the card declined. "The caterer is leaving." I excused myself from the meeting, stepping out into the cool, quiet hallway of the office building. I walked to the floor-to-ceiling window overlooking the city and accepted the call. "Sophia," Vanessa's voice was a shriek, so loud I had to pull the phone away from my ear. She was hyperventilating. "What is going on? The catering manager just ran the card for the final balance and it came back stolen. They're saying they're going to cancel the order. They're saying they won't order the food." I took a deep breath, watching a helicopter traverse the skyline. "I know, Vanessa." You know?" She paused, the hysteria shifting into confusion. "What do you mean you know? Did you call the bank? Is it a fraud alert? Fix it. Give me the other card number. They're standing right here looking at me like I'm a criminal." "I can't give you Anna." "Our number, Van," I said, my voice steady, though my hand trembled slightly. "I reported the card stolen. I closed the account." The silence on the other end was deafening. It lasted for 5 full seconds. "You, what?" she whispered. "Why would you do that? Are you insane?" "You told me to stay away," I said, keeping my tone flat, devoid of the anger that was boiling underneath. "You told me that me and my weird son were damaging your aesthetic. You made it very clear that we aren't part of your perfect life. So I removed myself. And since that credit card is in my name, paid from my salary, it's part of me. So it's gone too." "You spiteful B***TCH, she screamed. The veneer of the blushing bride vanished instantly. "You're doing this now, 3 days before the wedding? Do you have any idea how much this costs? Julian's parents are going to hear about this." "Julian's parents?" I let out a dry, humorless laugh. "You mean the ones who aren't paying for anything? The ones inviting investors to a party I'm funding?" "They're investing in our future," she yelled. "You're just jealous because I'm marrying up and you're alone with your broken kid." The insult stung, but it also sharpened my resolve. "Listen to me closely, Vanessa. I'm not doing this to be petty. I'm doing this because you need a wake-up call. Julian isn't who you think he is. Don't you dare start with your jealousy." "He's broke, Vanessa." I cut her off, my voice rising for the first time. "He has a different name. He has judgments against him. He was evicted from that luxury apartment 6 months ago. He's using you. He thinks we have money. He's marrying you for the credit limit you're maxing out right now." "Liar," she sobbed. "You're a liar. He showed me the deed. He showed me his portfolio. You're just trying to ruin my happiness because you're miserable. Fix the card, Sophia. Fix it right now, or I swear to God I will never speak to you again." "I can't fix it," I said. "And even if I could, I wouldn't. If Julian is so rich, let him write the check for the $15,000. Ask him, Vanessa. Ask him to pay the caterer right now. See what he says." "I hate you," she screamed. "I hate you." The line went dead. I lowered the phone, my heart pounding in my throat. I felt sick, physically sick. I had just detonated a bomb in my sister's life. But then I remembered Leo's face when he showed me the rock. I remembered Vanessa calling him a weirdo who would ruin her video. I walked back into the conference room. My team looked up. "Everything okay, Sophia?" my junior dev asked. "Yes," I said, sitting down and smoothing my skirt. "Just a minor glitch in a legacy system. Let's get back to the code." By Friday evening, the fallout had spread like a virus. I hadn't heard from Vanessa since the call on Wednesday, but the silence was worse than the screaming. It was the calm before the tsunami. I knew they were scrambling. I knew Frank was probably draining his pitiful 401k. I knew Julian was likely spinning a web of lies about frozen assets and banking errors. I was in my kitchen, making a grilled cheese sandwich for Leo, when the doorbell rang. I knew who it was before I opened it. Frank stood on my porch, looking 10 years older than he had last week. His shoulders were slumped, his eyes red-rimmed. He wasn't angry, he was broken. "Sophia," he said, his voice cracking. "Dad," I said, stepping aside to let him in. "Come in." He walked into the living room and sat heavily on the sofa. He didn't look at the beautiful, clean home I had bought. He just stared at his hands. "She's in hysterics, Sophia," he said softly. "The florist canceled. The venue is threatening to lock the doors tomorrow morning if they don't get a certified check by 9:00 a.m. Julian is trying to move money around, but he says the international transfers are stuck." "There are no international transfers, Dad," I said, sitting in the armchair opposite him. "There is no money." "Don't say that," Frank snapped, a flash of his old irritation surfacing. "He's a good man, he's just having a bad week. Look, I know you're hurt. I know what she said about Leo was wrong. She knows it too. She's under so much pressure." "She uninvited her nephew because he flaps his hands," I said coldly. "That's not pressure. That's cruelty." "She's sorry," Frank pleaded. "She told me to tell you she's sorry. Just, please, Sophia, I can't cover this. I tried to get a loan, but with the mortgage." He looked at me with wet eyes. "If this wedding doesn't happen, it will destroy her. It will humiliate us all. Do you really want that? Do you want your sister to be the laughingstock of the city?" "I want her to not marry a con man," I said. I reached for a manila folder on the coffee table. Marcus, my pie, had come through. The report was thick. "Read this," I said, sliding it toward him. Frank looked at the folder like it was radioactive. "What is this?" "It's Julian's life, the real one." Frank hesitated, then opened it. I watched his face as he read. I saw the confusion turn to shock, then to denial, and finally to horror. He saw the mugshot from a fraud arrest in Florida 3 years ago. He saw the list of debts. He saw the marriage certificate to a woman in Chicago that had never been legally dissolved. He's married," Frank whispered. "Technically, yes, separated but not divorced, which means tomorrow's wedding wouldn't even be legal," I said. "He's looking for a payday, Dad. He thinks you're rich. He thinks I'm the bank." Frank closed the folder. His hands were shaking. No, this can't be right. He drives a Porsche. He wears a Rolex." "Leased and fake," I said. But the guests," Frank stammered, grasping for straws. "The investors, the people coming tomorrow, we can't just cancel, we can't." "You have to," I said. "We can't," Frank stood up, his face flushing red. "It's too late, maybe. Maybe we just get through the wedding and we deal with this later. Maybe he can change. Sophia, please, just pay the venue, just $12,000. I'll pay you back, I swear." I looked at my father. He was willing to let his daughter marry a criminal rather than face the embarrassment of a canceled wedding. He was willing to sacrifice her future to save face. "No," I said. "Sophia." I said, "No, Dad. I am done paying for lies." He looked at me with something close to hatred. "You're doing this on purpose. You want her to fail." "I'm trying to save her life," I said. "If you won't tell her, I will. I'm coming to the venue tomorrow." "You're not invited," he spat. "Security won't let you in." "I think they will," I said calmly, standing up. Because unless that bill is paid by 9:00 a.m., there is no security, there is no wedding, there is just an empty room. Frank stared at me, defeated. He grabbed the folder and stormed out of the house, slamming the door so hard the windows rattled. I stood there in the silence. I knew he wouldn't show her the folder. He was too much of a coward. He would hope for a miracle. He would hope Julian would magically produce the money. My phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. "I know what you're doing. You better watch your back. If you ruin this for me, I'll make sure you lose your job. I know people." It was Julian. I smiled, a cold, dangerous smile. He had just made the classic mistake of threatening a woman who builds security systems for a living. I forwarded the text to Marcus. "Add this to the file." Then I went to the closet and pulled out my dress. Not the maid of honor dress. I had burned that in the fireplace 2 nights ago. I pulled out a sharp, charcoal gray pantsuit. It was my boardroom battle suit. The wedding was tomorrow. I wasn't going to stand at the altar. I was going to stand in the wreckage and make sure my sister survived the crash. The Gilded Cage was one of those venues that relied entirely on mood. Without the $50,000 worth of flowers, mood lighting, and drapery that Vanessa had ordered, it looked exactly like what it was: a renovated warehouse with exposed brick and cold, concrete floors. I arrived at 1:00 p.m. The ceremony was supposed to start at 1:30. The parking lot was full of high-end cars, rentals mostly if I knew Julian's crowd, and a few confused delivery trucks idling near the loading dock. I parked my modest sedan right next to Julian's white Porsche. I checked my reflection in the rearview mirror. The charcoal suit was sharp, severe. My hair was pulled back in a tight, no-nonsense bun. I didn't look like a maid of honor. I looked like a litigator arriving for a hostile takeover. I walked toward the entrance. 2 large men in black suits stood at the door with clipboards. Julian's security. "Name," one grunted, not looking up. "Sophia," I said, not breaking stride. He looked up, blinking. Mr. Morty said. "Mr. Morty doesn't pay your salary," I said, my voice cutting through the humid afternoon air. In fact, looking at the catering trucks idling back there, I doubt Mr. Morty is paying anyone today. If you want to get paid for your time, I suggest you step aside. I'm the only one here with a solvent bank account. The guard hesitated, glancing at his partner. The logic of a bouncing check is a powerful motivator. He stepped back. Inside, the atmosphere was suffocating. About 80 guests were milling around the lobby. The main hall doors were closed. There was no music, no champagne, just a low, anxious murmur of conversation. I spotted my Aunt Linda whispering furiously to a cousin. I saw Julian's investors, a group of men in flashy suits who looked less like Wall Street bankers and more like loan sharks checking their watches. And then I saw Frank. He was standing near the coat check, wringing his hands, his face a mask of pale terror. When he saw me, he looked like he might faint. "Sophia," he hissed, rushing over and grabbing my elbow. "What are you doing here? You can't be here. Julian is." He's furious. He told everyone you sabotaged the banking transfer out of spite. "Let him be furious," I said, pulling my arm away gently. "Where is he?" "He's in the main hall with Vanessa. They're arguing. The venue manager is threatening to call the police if they don't leave by 2. Frank's voice cracked. "Please, Sophia, just go. Don't make a scene." "The scene is already here, Dad," I said. "I'm just here to drop the curtain." I pushed past him and threw open the double doors to the main hall. The room was vast and empty. A single spotlight was on, illuminating the altar area where Julian and Vanessa stood. Vanessa was in her dress, a breathtaking $10,000 gown that looked tragic in the stark light. She was crying, her mascara running down her cheeks. Julian was pacing, screaming into a cell phone, his hand chopping the air aggressively. The venue manager, a stern woman with a headset, stood nearby with her arms crossed, looking unimpressed. The noise of the doors opening made them all turn. "You," Julian roared. He hung up the phone and pointed a shaking finger at me. You realized what you did. You ruined this, you jealous bitter. Stop talking, Julian, I said. My voice wasn't loud, but in the acoustic cavern of the warehouse, it carried. I walked down the center aisle, the click of my heels echoing like gunshots. Get her out of here, Julian shouted to the empty room. Security. No one came. They aren't coming, I said, stopping 10 feet from the altar. I looked at Vanessa. She looked small, defeated, like a child playing dress-up. Vanessa, look at me. Why did you do this? She sobbed, her voice raw. Why couldn't you just let me have this? Because he is stealing from you, I said calmly. Don't listen to her. Julian lunged forward, placing himself between me and my sister. His face was twisted, ugly. She's lying, she's mentally unstable. That's why her husband left her. That's why her kid is defective. The air left the room. I felt a cold, white-hot rage centered in my chest, but I didn't flinch. I didn't blink. My son, I said, my voice deadly quiet, is brilliant, and my husband didn't leave. He died. But you wouldn't know that because you don't research people unless they have a trust fund. I reached into my blazer and pulled out the manila envelope. What is that? Julian sneered, though I saw the flicker of fear in his eyes. This, I said, raising the envelope so the investors, who had quietly slipped into the back of the room, could see, is the reason your credit cards don't work, Julian. It's the reason you don't have a deed to the vineyard. And it's the reason you can't legally marry my sister today. Security, Julian screamed again, his voice cracking. I ignored him. I looked past him directly at Vanessa. He's married, Van. Vanessa froze, the tears stopped. She blinked, her brain struggling to process the words. What? Julian Miller, I said, opening the folder and pulling out the document with the raised seal. Not Morty. Miller. He married a woman named Isabella Rodriguez in Chicago 4 years ago. They are currently separated, but the divorce was never finalized because he couldn't pay the filing fees. That's a lie, Julian yelled, lunging for the paper. I sidestepped him easily. It's a public record, Julian. Case number 2022 D4590. Would you like me to read the affidavit where she accuses you of identity theft? The room was deadly silent. The investors at the back began to murmur. One of them took out his phone. Vanessa, I said, softening my voice. He doesn't have money. He has distinct, documented debts totaling over $200,000. The investment meeting today, he was going to use your signature on the marriage license to secure a loan from these men. Vanessa looked at Julian. Her face was pale, her eyes wide. Julian, is that true? Julian looked around wildly. The trap had snapped shut. His charm, his arrogance, his aesthetic, it all dissolved. He looked like exactly what he was, a cornered rat. It's complicated, babe, he stammered, holding out his hands. She's crazy. That paperwork is forged. I was going to handle it. Once we got the wedding money, I was going to fix everything. I did it for us. For us, Vanessa whispered. She looked down at her dress, the dress I had paid for. Then she looked at the empty hall. You told me you bought the house. I did, practically, Julian pleaded. I just needed a bridge loan. Sophia ruined the liquidity. There is no house, I said, delivering the final blow. You were evicted from the rental on Park Avenue. Your things are in a storage unit in Queens. Unit 404. I have the receipt. Julian stared at me with pure hatred. You ruined my life. No, I said, stepping closer until I was face to face with him. I saw. Yvette hers. I turned to the back of the room. Gentlemen, I called out to the men in suits. I suggest you check your wallets. And Mr. Miller, I believe the venue manager has already called the police regarding the fraudulent check you wrote for the deposit. At the mention of police, the color drained from Julian's face entirely. He didn't say another word. He turned and ran. He literally ran, sprinting down the side aisle toward the emergency exit, bursting through the doors and setting off the alarm. Clang, 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 clang. The alarm blared, a chaotic, jarring rhythm that matched the destruction of the day. Vanessa stood alone at the altar. She didn't move. She just stood there in the spotlight, shaking, while the alarm screamed and the few guests who had wandered in stared in horror. I walked up the steps. I didn't hug her immediately. I just stood beside her, shielding her from the view of the room. "Come on," I said, my voice gentle. "Let's go home." She looked at me, her eyes hollow. "He called Leo defective." "I know," I said. He's married." "I know." She crumpled then. Her legs just gave out. I caught her before she hit the floor, the layers of silk and tulle collapsing around us like a deflated parachute. She buried her face in my shoulder and wailed, a sound of pure, unadulterated heartbreak. The fallout was swift, messy, and absolute. We didn't go back to Frank's house. I took Vanessa straight to my place. She spent the first 2 days in the guest room, refusing to eat, refusing to speak, just sleeping in one of my old t-shirts. Frank was a mess of a different kind. He showed up on Sunday looking like a ghost. He sat at my kitchen table, drinking coffee, staring at the wall. "I didn't want to believe it," he said quietly. "I just wanted her to be happy. I thought, if I just closed my eyes, it would all work out." "Closing your eyes is how you get hit, Dad," I said, pouring him a refill. I wasn't angry anymore. I was just tired. "We can't do that anymore. No more enabling, no more pretending." He nodded, tears leaking from his eyes. "You were right, Sophia. You were right about everything." Julian didn't get far. The investors he had invited were actually associated with a loan shark operation he had borrowed from to buy the engagement ring. They found him before the police did. He ended up in the hospital with 2 broken legs and a fraud charge waiting for him upon discharge. The police came to take a statement from Vanessa, but I handled it. I gave them the file Marcus had compiled. It was an open and shut case. But the real work wasn't legal. It was emotional. On the 3rd day, I came home from work early to find Vanessa sitting on the living room floor. She wasn't alone. Leo was sitting across from her. Between them was his rock collection. I stopped in the doorway, holding my breath. "This is obsidian," Leo was saying, holding up a shiny black stone. "It's volcanic glass, it's very sharp, you have to be careful." Vanessa, looking pale and fragile, devoid of makeup, reached out and took the stone. Her hand trembled. "It's beautiful, Leo." "Do you like rocks?" Leo asked, tilting his head. Vanessa looked at him, really looked at him. For the first time in years, she didn't see a prop or an inconvenience. She saw a little boy who was kind and interesting and entirely himself. "I do," she whispered, her voice cracking. I think I need to learn more about them. I think I've been looking at the wrong things for a long time." Leo smiled, that brilliant, unfiltered smile. "That's okay, I can teach you." I watched them, a lump forming in my throat. Vanessa looked up and saw me. Her eyes filled with tears again. She didn't say anything, but the look on her face said it all. "I'm sorry, I was wrong, thank you." I walked over and sat down on the floor with them, kicking off my heels. "Is that the amethyst?" I asked Leo. "Yes," Leo chirped. "It promotes calmness." "I think we could all use some of that," I said. In the months that followed, life didn't magically become perfect. Vanessa had to file for bankruptcy to clear the debts she had unknowingly co-signed for. She moved back in with Dad, but this time, the dynamic was different. She got a job, a real job, working as a receptionist at a veterinary clinic. It wasn't glamorous, but she liked the animals. She said they didn't care what she wore. We paid off the venue fee. I helped her with a payment plan, but I didn't pay it for her. That was the new rule. I would help her stand, but I wouldn't carry her. We never talked about the aesthetic of that day again, but we did talk about boundaries. We talked about respect. And every Sunday, Vanessa came over for dinner. Not to critique the house, not to ask for money, but to learn about rocks. One evening, about 6 months later, we were sitting on the patio, watching Leo run around the yard with a flashlight, looking for night crawlers. "You know," Vanessa said, sipping her iced tea. "I was so afraid of him ruining my picture." "I know," I said. She shook her head, a sad smile playing on her lips. I didn't realize the picture was already broken. He was the only real thing in it. She reached over and squeezed my hand. "Thank you for stopping me, Sophia. Thank you for being the villain I needed." I squeezed back. I wasn't the villain, Van. I was just the firewall. She laughed, a genuine sound. "Yeah, the best firewall money can't buy." We sat in the silence, listening to the crickets and the joyous sound of my son discovering the world, safe and loved, exactly where he belonged.